Alright, number 10. Vital Remains. US-based death metal, although not based out of Florida, this time based out of Rhode Island. And Vital Remains started off as kind of like a traditional death metal band, early 90s kind of style. Somewhat mid-tempo songs, got some blast beats, not a ton. But I really like the production on the first album, Let Us Pray. Has this really cool, kind of spooky atmosphere to it. Kind of reminds me of Slayer's Hell Awaits album. And they continued on with that kind of traditional death metal sound up until 2000's Dawn of the Apocalypse, where they went from bolt thrower tempos, maybe 160, 180 BPM, to Nile tempos, where it's like 220, 240 BPM. And the ante and heaviness was upped even further when the band added Deicide vocalist and bassist Glenn Benton onto their 2003 record Dechristianize, as well as the 2007 record Icons of Evil. But one song that I want to highlight is the title track from Dechristianize. Has this part in the middle of the song that just gets very kind of, I don't want to say symphonic, but very grand, very melodic. Just has this awesome, awesome feel to it. But yeah, Vital Remains is legit, and who knows, maybe later on in the video, we'll talk more about Glenn Benton's other escapade, Deicide. Number 9, from Canada, a currently leaderless country. Yes, I keep up with current events. I saw Trudeau resigned. Cryptopsy, baby. But these guys are pioneers of technical death metal, pushing the speed boundaries of metal past the sound barrier. And I can just imagine, this band going in to record their first demo, sound engineers probably like, all right, boys, what tempo is this song? Like 160? And they're like Kylo Ren in the new Star Wars. They're like, more! He's like, what, 180? More! And while speed is definitely a part of Cryptopsy's signature sound, I don't think they just, make fast songs for the sake of making fast songs. They have an uncanny ability to just make these songs memorable. Like I find with a lot of super fast albums, when you listen to everything, the album all the way through, sometimes the songs kind of bleed together. But each song is memorable on Cryptopsy's best work. And my favorite era of the band's probably the Lord Worm era. He did vocals for their debut, Blasphemy Made Flesh. I think this is 1994. And then the follow-up, None So Vile, 1996, which is these are my favorite albums from the band. But I just love Lord Worm's unintelligible, yet also just absolutely inhuman sounding vocals. The drummer, Flo Monnier, whatever, he does an incredible job to just keep pace with all the crazy ass shit going on around him. And one of the novelties of Cryptopsy that I really, really appreciate is the fact that the bass is very prominent in a lot of their songs, which I think was somewhat boundary pushing for kind of 90s death metal. A lot of times the bass was just buried in the mix. But I'm not going to act like Cryptopsy is the most consistent band ever. Whisper Supremacy, the first album, post Lord Worm, I actually think that one's pretty good. Some of their mid-period stuff, though, kind of borders on weird / avant-garde. Although I do like some of the new stuff that they've been doing with the new vocalist, Matt McGahee? Oshag Hennessy? I just really like his vocals. You know, he's got great low growls. You know, like Tome of Suffering, Book 1 and 2, as well as the new album, As Gomorrah Burns from 2023. He's just got a great sound. He's kind of got a few like vocal tricks up his sleeve that he busts out every now and then that I think are pretty cool. All right, and at number 8, we have the band that arguably created death metal. We got Death. Now, before you bitch at me, I'm only considering the first 3 Death albums. You know, this is an old school / traditional death metal list. So I'll probably do a separate video in the future on progressive death metal where I will talk about the rest of these albums. And it all started with one album, released in 1987. Scream, Bloody Gore. Like I said, some people say this is the genesis of death metal. Some might say Possessed's 7 Churches from 1985 or 86, I believe. Personally, I don't really give a shit about that debate. I'm just glad that death metal exists at all. But Scream, Bloody Gore is a classic for a goddamn reason, people. You know, the songs are great, and while the production isn't, you know, super high quality, in my opinion, it's actually perfect. Just sets a great atmosphere. Like, to me, it sounds like they almost recorded this in a cave, which just adds even more to the atmosphere of these songs. You know, you got the classic tracks, Infernal Death, Evil Dead, Zombie Ritual, with the classic line, "Fucking rape and zombie horse!" Fucking rape and zombie horse! And then in 1988, they're like, fuck it, we're gonna release Leprosy, which is arguably heavier. You know, I hadn't listened to this album in a while. I came to revisit it and doing this video. And, you know, I hear Born Dead, Left for Dead. I was like, shit, man, this is really heavy for 88. And, of course, the classic track from this album, the chorus I imagine you want to hear, and I know that I want to hear, "Pull the plug!" And then in 1990, my favorite of the old school Death albums came out, Spiritual Healing. And, you know, like the other Death albums, you got more classic moments. You got the flanger guitar to open up Within the Mind, which I think is really cool. And you've got other classic lyrics, my favorite of which being the jab that Chuck takes at Tipper Gore on the track Living Monstrosity. Some say she's naive. She's a stupid bitch. Some say to forgive. Guilty she should die. Yeah, you stick it to her, Chuck. You know, how fun and badass is it to just be like, some say she's naive, she's a stupid bitch. Although I actually made the mistake of saying that to my mom when she wouldn't let me drink enough Monster, and then I ended up getting grounded. I'm telling you, you do not want to face the wrath of a scorned Latin woman. And while not fully diving into progressive death metal, you know, those elements of death sound start to kind of pop their head up on this album. But I think for the most part, you know, it's traditional death metal, and it fucking rules. Practice what you preach. Do harmfulness now to cease. Knowledge is at our hands. Number 7. Moving on to Europe. Sweden specifically. Dismember. Dismember are titans of Swedish death metal alongside bands like Unleashed and Entombed. And I actually really like their first 2 albums a lot. Very ferocious and raw, yet also very musical too. You know, maybe not in an explicitly melodic way, maybe something like how Children of Bodom is, but the riffs are just very head bang inducing. carried on, their sound evolved. With 1995's Killing Capacity, it got a little bit more melodic, definitely a little bit more groovy for sure, until in 1997's titled Death Metal, the band went full-on melodic death metal. But I find it very impressive how they were so authentically and convincingly able to switch their sound from the more, riff-oriented death metal to their, more melodic later output. And like I said before, even the more aggressive stuff always has some hints of melody, and if not that, at least more musicality. And this is the album that really is the bridge between the heavier stuff and the more melodic stuff. Like, this album is a bit more groovy, and it's got their first kind of melodic song, at least, track listing wise or whatever, on Frozen Fields, which, fan favorite, classic. But in a nutshell, what I think makes Dismember such a great band is that they kind of have a little bit of everything for everyone. If you're like a hardcore death metal fan, you only want the heaviest shit, you got the first 2 Dismember albums to keep you occupied. If you're not as into the death metal, or maybe if the raw production is maybe too much, or what have you, their later output is a lot more melodic and a lot more accessible. Number 6, we go from the flurry fjords of Sweden to the dirty, grimy swamps of Florida. Deicide, baby, come on! Alright, elephant in the room time. Is Glenn Benton, bassist, vocalist, songwriter, and composer for Deicide, is he cringe? Absolutely. But if I'm going to listen to a band that is run by a guy who ran his own cult, killed animals for fun, and was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder, I can look past a little cringe as long as the music is good. And it is. Deicide are custodians of death metal. Before bands like them, Death, and Morbid Angel, death and black metal hadn't really yet crystallized into their own genres yet. People were just trying to push music to as fast and as extreme as you can make it. The extreme metal pioneers of maybe the mid to late 80s, they weren't trying to specifically make death metal or specifically make black metal because the norms for those genres didn't quite exist yet. These early extreme metal pioneers, they were basically just trying to push the music as fast and as heavy as they possibly could. There wasn't really a specific target that they were aiming at. Think of bands like Venom or Sarcophago. People argue all the time, is this actually a black metal album or is this just heavy metal? And then with Sarcophago, is this thrash metal? Is this death metal? Is this black metal? We don't really know because at the time they didn't have a target to shoot at. They were just trying to push the music as much as they could. But it was bands like Deicide, like Morbid Angel, like Death, that helped crystallize the genre into what we know it as today. The deep guttural vocals, a lot of riffs played in such a way that emphasizes heaviness and brutality, blast beats, things like that. And the reason I say all that is because even though Glenn Benton is a real-life cartoon character, let us not forget the contributions that he made to the genre, and let's put a little respect on his name. And outside of some of the classic albums, Deicide has some other good stuff, like 2005's Stench of Redemption, I think 2014 In the Minds of Evil, and then the new album, 2024, Banished by Sin. Say what you will about the AI artwork, but I think the music's all right. Number 5, American death metal, this time from Yonkers, New York. Immolation, baby. For sure, one of the most unique bands on this list. I always have a difficult time trying to describe Immolation's sound. Like, it's definitely traditional death metal, just a little weirder. And not weirder in like a progressive way where there's odd time and stuff like that. And not weird in an avant-garde way. It's just like, it's just unusual. Like the riffs and the vocal deliveries are just kind of unusual. You got to hear it for yourself. You know, if either you or someone you know is like, meh, I don't like death metal. It all sounds the same. Show me something different. And I'm going to tell them to fuck off, get a job, and then pick up an Immolation record from the latest record store. What the fuck is wrong with you? And not only is their music different, but I feel like their attitude is kind of different. You know, other bands might be all about blood and guts, or maybe like satanic occultism or something. And, you know, there is a little bit of that on the first album. But Immolation mostly like approaches anti-Christian thinking from a philosophical angle as opposed to like an occult angle, if that makes any sense. And this band has done nothing but age as gracefully as Shakira. Because even today, in modern times, they're still putting out good stuff. 2017's Atonement, 2022's An Act of God. I mean, you could straight-face argue that these are like, you know, their best albums, period. Number 4, Suffocation, baby, come on. The pro-creators of brutal death metal. Although I find it hilarious that Terrence Hobbs, the band's guitar player, main composer, I don't know where exactly I saw the quote, but he said something along the lines of, a lot of bands say that we inspired them, and when I hear their music, I don't take that as a compliment. Could you just imagine some guy be like, oh my god, Terrence, oh, I'm a big fan, here's my band's demo, can you check it out? He listens to it, he's like, this shit sucks, you fucking suck, just give up, kid, you suck. Most bands that have a trailblazing status really revel in their pioneering reputation, but I just think it's funny that Terrence Hobbs feels the same way about his musical legacy as Anakin did when he killed Mace Windu in Revenge of the Sith.
What have I done?
But kind of like a game of telephone, the original message or music that Suffocation did may have gotten distorted as it's kind of been filtered out through other bands and stuff, but the original message is legit. Now, Suffocation is what I would consider advanced death metal. Like, once you get past the first, I don't know, I guess tier of the iceberg with death metal, you know, bands like Death or Cannibal Corpse, and you want more heaviness, you want more weirdness, then you start to get the bands like Suffocation, Immolation, Cryptopsy, stuff like that. But Suffocation is advanced death metal, both for their heaviness and their technicality. You know, heaviness, somewhat self-explanatory. You know, Terrence loves making a lot of palm-muted riffs. I love palm-muted riffs. And, you know, sometimes they'll play them at, like, you know, 200, 220 BPM, just rip your face off. Or sometimes they'll slow it way the fuck down, make it doomy, go to 70 BPM, and then they'll write a riff that just fucking hits you harder than Ray Rice knocked out his fucking fiancé in the elevator. And on the technicality side, I mean, of course, there are times where Terrence is just ripping out a super shreddy solo. But most of the time, it's just that there's a lot going on with the riffs, whether they're being tremolo picked, palm muted, what have you. Terrence's riffs often have a lot going on. And I think overall, Suffocation is a pretty consistent band. Obviously, the 90s stuff, classic. Even some of the mid-period stuff, like 2004's Soul to Deny. And I think 2008 or 2009's Blood Oath are pretty good. Even some of the newer stuff is alright. Their final album with the original vocalist, Frank Mullen, Of the Dark Light from 2017. You know, I don't love the production. It does sound kind of a little bit stale, but I mean, the songs are good. That's what really matters at the end of the day. And the new stuff with their new vocalist, this is Hymns from the Apocrypha, or something like that, 2023. I really like the new guy. He's got a great voice, just sounds fucking inhuman. Number 3. We have a band from the UK in it, bruv. I don't know where exactly, but probably from some town called fucking Piccadilly Village. Bolt Thrower, baby. Now, this is probably the number 1 band that I've seen people most consistently say that they've never had a bad album. And having released 8 albums, that's a pretty impressive feat. That's a very tall claim. Now, would I say they've never released a bad album? I don't know. That's kind of a nuanced conversation I don't really feel like getting into right now. But I can tell you they definitely have a better fucking case than Mastodon. I just gotta say, I can't stand when people are like, Mastodon have no bad albums. What? Have you heard Mastodon? You know, I think Crack the Sky is cool, but Remission sucks. Leviathan sucks. Once More Around the Sun, abominable. Yeah, but I'm sorry, I lost focus. This video is about Bolt Thrower. It's not about Mastodon, so, you know, we don't talk about that. And even though this band is from the UK, unlike their food, these guys are very far from bland. Just super heavy-ass, down-tuned riffs, kind of using the harmonic minor, or maybe like the Byzantine scale to give it more of like an exotic sound. And unlike other bands on this list, Bolt Thrower don't really have like a ton of blast beats. Like, even as heavy as the band sounds, it's not like stereotypically death metal kind of heavy. You know, a lot of mid-tempo songs as opposed to like super fast scorchers, you know, things like that. But, you know, they do have double bass, and their riffs are just absolutely crushing. You know, whether they're at mid-tempo or whether they delve into doomy territory. But yeah, so the band hasn't released any new music since 2005's Those Once Loyal. And from what the band said, they just wanted their follow-up album to be of equal or greater quality than its predecessor. You know, they didn't want to just release an album for the sake of releasing an album. Although, unfortunately, tragedy struck in 2015. Their drummer, Martin Kearns, unexpectedly passed away. And the band went on hiatus, you know, trying to figure out if they wanted to keep going on. And on the 1-year anniversary of Martin's death, the band announced that they would be splitting up. And that is the end of Bolt Thrower. Number 2, Cannibal Corpse. To me, the most consistent band in death metal. These guys been cranking out albums since 1990, 16 total since then, and they've all been of pretty good quality. You could argue that maybe the mid-period Cannibal Corpse is maybe a little bit mid, but I think the new Corpse Grinder stuff can stand toe-to-toe with the Barnes classics. You know, this band, you still got original members Alex Webster on the bass, who's a beast, and drummer Paul Mazurkiewicz, who's a vegetarian, believe it or not. You also have former Solstice vocalist and guitar player Rob Barrett, who, while not an original member, he's been in the band for a while. I think he joined the band around Tomb of the Mutilated or maybe Butchered at Birth, something like that. And then, of course, the iconic, thick-necked, deep-voiced, human golden retriever that is their frontman, George Corpse Grinder Fisher.
A couple of Lego sets were on clearance, and that was it. That was it. Once you get me into the toy section and there's clearance, then I bought right into it. Bro, this is my favorite. Every time I go to Target, every time I have to do this guy. He farts.
And honestly, I think Corpse Grinder is overall a better vocalist than Chris Barnes. You could say Chris Barnes maybe has him beat on the low growls, but when it comes to like the high screams, I don't think it's even a contest. And if you're talking right now today, like not in their primes, right now today, this very second, categorically, Corpse Grinder is better. I mean, you can go on YouTube and look up compilations. Just type in Chris Barnes E, because his high screams just sound like E. And of course, even though he's no longer in the band, I absolutely love the fretwork of fire safety enthusiast and dare advocate Pat O'Brien. I mean, if you haven't heard the song Frantic Disembowelment, you gotta see that shit. It is nuts. But to sum up Cannibal Corpse as a band very neatly, I think they are kind of like the torchbearers or the old guard, whatever you want to call it, of traditional death metal. If you know death metal, you know Cannibal Corpse. If you're new to death metal, then, Cannibal Corpse, great first band to get into, whether it's the early classic stuff with Chris Barnes, Tomb of the Mutilated, or The Bleeding. Or, if the rough production is an obstacle to you or something like that, you can try the newer Corpse Grinder stuff. I got Torture here, Red Before Black, but honestly, you could just pick any one of these. They're all pretty good. Just whatever, I guess, album art speaks to you the most. Just pick that one out, give it a spin. Number one, if you're a fan of death metal, then I'm sure there's one band that you've been waiting for me to talk about that I have not yet. And that is because they're number one, they're the best. Morbid fucking Angel, baby. Come on. Morbid Angel fucking rules. I mean, you got the heinous riff writing of Trey Azathoth, or Azathoth, whatever, I don't know. The iconic deep vocals of David Vincent. One of my drumming heroes and idols. Commando Pete Sandoval. And my favorite guitar player in the band besides Trey, Eric Rutan, who, if that name is familiar to you, he used to produce Cannibal Corpse's albums, and then when Pat O'Brien got kicked out of the band, he stepped in. So, I mean, what a life that guy had. He's in Cannibal Corpse, he's in Morbid Angel, that's fucking awesome. And I think what makes Morbid Angel so special is that they have one of the most unique and unrepeatable sounds in all of death metal. You might hear bands that sound like Cannibal Corpse, or maybe they sound like Entombed. I have never heard a band that sounds anything like Morbid Angel. And I think the uniqueness of Morbid Angel's sounds comes from the fact that the guitar player, Trey, and drummer, Commando Pete Sandoval, neither of them had, proper classical training. These guys are maestros of their instruments, don't get me wrong. These aren't like monkeys on a typewriter bashing random keys who just so happen to, write Macbeth. Like, these guys know what they're doing, but I think because they developed their own style, their own idiosyncratic style outside of standard teaching, that's probably what makes a lot of their riffs and musical parts just kind of a little weird. And for what makes Trey's sound unique specifically, I mean, this isn't the only thing that makes it unique, but I know one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes with his riffs, you know, he'll write like a normal riff and then he'll add like a little doo to it, you know, like with Blessed Are the Sick. It's like bow, 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 bow. You know, Trey solos are also almost always either crazy ass shredding, crazy ass whammy bar stuff, crazy ass tapping, or crazy ass shredding, whammy bar tapping stuff. Although not everything Trey does is super like overly technical. You know, sometimes he knows when to lay back and just play a bunch of massive fucking power chords. Now, Morbid Angel do not have a spotless discography. Illud Divinum Insanus from 2013 is fucking terrible. And their Heretic album sounds like it was produced by Helen Keller. And I think it has like 16 or 18 songs. I think only like 8 of them are real songs. And then the rest are just like these little 2-minute instrumental throwaway tracks. Like, what the fuck, guys? Come on. But the good shit from Morbid Angel more than makes up for it. You know, even the Stephen Tucker era of the band, which I find a lot of people kind of skimp on solely because it isn't David Vincent, that is an absolute shame because these songs are phenomenal. And as a matter of fact, Formula's Fatal to the Flesh, that's my favorite Morbid Angel album.
I'm the collector of souls, for the never past my control. I think of what is, and nothing of that I do. I'm the Alpha Omega.
And one thing I want to highlight from the band before I go is I found this live footage of the band playing in Montreal live in 1998, probably for the Formula's Fatal to the Flesh tour. And this live performance of Nothing Is Not is just absolutely incredible. Quite frankly, if this doesn't convince you that Morbid Angel is the shit, then I can't help you. You're fucked, kid. You need to give up. You need to get a job. You know, keep listening to Sleep Token or maybe try Asking Alexandria or some shit, but you're fucking toast, dude. You're done.